My name is Rebecca Coleman, and I was 34 years old the day I learned my whole life had been a lie, dressed up in Sunday dinners, and "I love you, baby girl" texts. It started with a phone call from my cousin Renita, who never calls unless something's wrong. "Rebecca," she said, voice shaking, "why is your brother's fiancé posting a video walkthrough of the Cedar Hollow house, the one on Magnolia Ridge, with a caption that says, 'Welcome home, Coleman family'?" My stomach dropped straight through the floor. Before we continue, please hit that like button and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'd love to see how far this story reaches. Now let's continue. Cedar Hollow wasn't just any house. It was the house, a 5-bedroom colonial with a wraparound porch and a view of the lake. The house my grandmother Odessa Coleman had raised 11 children in before she passed it down through the family. The house I had spent 3 years, $40,000 in savings, and every ounce of my heart negotiating to purchase for $1.5 million after my parents told me directly, sitting at their kitchen table, that it was mine to buy first. I called my mother, Michelle, immediately. She answered on the 4th ring, breathless, like she'd been avoiding the phone. "Mama, is Jaden buying Cedar Hollow?" Silence. Then, "Rebecca, honey, let's not do this over the phone." "Mama, answer me. Your brother needed a fresh start. You understand family looks out for each other." I sat down on my kitchen floor, phone pressed so hard against my ear it hurt, and I understood one thing clearly. My own mother had just confirmed, without apology, that everything I'd built toward for 3 years had been quietly handed to my younger brother, and nobody had said a word to me. To understand how this happened, you have to understand Jaden. My brother was 2 years younger than me and had spent his entire adult life being catchable. Every time he fell, our parents were there with a net stitched from excuses. Failed restaurant venture at 26. Daddy quietly paid off the lease. Repossessed Range Rover at 29. Mama called it a rough patch. 3 broken engagements before Brianna. Always somebody else's fault. I loved my brother. I want to be clear about that, because this isn't a story about hating Jaden. It's a story about watching a pattern for 30 years and telling yourself it wasn't really a pattern. I was the daughter who paid her own way through Clark Atlanta, who built an interior design firm from a card table in a studio apartment, who never asked my parents for a dime after age 22. And somehow, in the calculus of our family, that made me the one who didn't need help. "You're strong, Rebecca," my father Gerald used to say, like it was a compliment. "Jaden needs us." 3 years ago, at that same kitchen table, my parents had looked me in the eye and said Cedar Hollow, Grandma Odessa's house, should go to the family member who'd actually earn it the right way. They meant me. I put down an earnest deposit. I hired an inspector. I lost sleep for 36 months building a life around a house that held my grandmother's laughter in its walls. Now Brianna Ashford, a woman I'd met exactly 4 times, was doing Instagram reels in my grandmother's kitchen, captioning it, "Our New Beginning." I didn't scream. I didn't cry. Not yet. I booked a flight to Charlotte for the next morning. My parents' house in Charlotte smelled like it always did. Cornbread and pine sol, but nothing about that visit felt like home. My father sat in his recliner, refusing to make eye contact. My mother wrung a dish towel like she could wring the truth out of it. "Explain it to me," I said, standing in their living room like a stranger, slowly. "The closing's in 9 days," my mother said. "Jaden needed collateral. His credits shot after the divorce. We told the bank we'd co-sign and..." "And what, Mama? You just decided the house that was promised to me would make better collateral for him?" My father finally spoke. "Rebecca, you have savings. You have a business. Jaden has nothing. What did you want us to do? Let him drown?" "You could have called me. You could have said one word before you let his fiancé post a video in Grandma's kitchen." That's when Brianna walked in. I hadn't even known she was there. 29, polished, holding a paint swatch book like she already owned the place. "Rebecca? Hi," she said, smiling like we were old friends. "I know this is a transition, but Jaden and I have really been dreaming about this. I hope we can build a good relationship, sister to sister." Something in me went cold and still. "You are not my sister," I said, "and this is not a transition. This is a theft." The room went silent. My mother's dish towel stopped moving. I walked out to my rental car and sat there for 20 minutes before I could drive, because I finally understood. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a decision my whole family had made about me, without me. I called my best friend, Denise Whitfield, a real estate attorney I'd known since our Clark Atlanta days. Denise didn't do small talk when it mattered. "Rebecca, slow down. Walk me through the paper trail. Did you ever sign anything with your parents guaranteeing the sale to you?" "No, it was verbal, a promise. 3 years of promises." Denise sighed the sigh of someone who'd seen this story 100 times in courtrooms. Verbal promises don't hold in probate or real estate transfers, especially if your parents are the title holders. If they own Cedar Hollow outright, they can legally sell it to whoever they want. So, I have no recourse. I didn't say that. Who currently holds title to that house? I paused. My parents. Grandma Odessa left it to them when she passed, 8 years ago. Are you sure about that? Do you have the will? I didn't. Nobody in my family had ever shown me the actual will, just the assumption, repeated so many times over the years it calcified into fact. Grandma left the house to Mama and Daddy. "Get me a copy," Denise said. "Before this closing, I don't like this, Rebecca. Something about the timeline is rushed. Family estates don't usually turn into fire sales in 9 days, unless somebody's hiding something." I hung up the phone with my hands trembling, not from sadness this time, but from the first spark of something else, suspicion. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Grandma Odessa, about the way she used to pull me into the kitchen at Cedar Hollow and say, "This house remembers everything, baby. Walls don't forget." I didn't know yet how right she was. 2 days later, I drove to Cedar Hollow myself, using the spare key I'd kept since childhood, the one my parents apparently forgot I had. The house was empty. Jaden and Brianna hadn't moved anything in yet. I walked through those familiar rooms, my throat tight, memorizing everything like I might never see it again. In the attic, tucked behind a water-stained box of Christmas ornaments, I found my grandmother's old cedar chest. I hadn't seen it in years. Inside were photographs, church programs, a Bible with pressed flowers, and a manila envelope, yellowed with age, sealed with a strip of packing tape that had gone brittle. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a document titled Last Will and Testament of Odessa May Coleman, dated 4 years before her death, 2 years before the version my parents had always referenced. I read it standing in that dusty attic with sunlight slicing through the vent, and the words rearranged everything I thought I knew about my family. To my granddaughter Rebecca Coleman, who sat with me through every chemotherapy appointment when my own children could not find the time, I leave the property known as Cedar Hollow in recognition of a debt of love that money cannot repay. I sat down hard on the attic floor. My grandmother hadn't left the house to my parents at all. She'd left it to me, 8 years ago, which meant every single promise my parents made about letting me buy it had been a lie, stacked on top of a stolen inheritance. My hands were still shaking when I found the second paper in the envelope, a letter, handwritten in my grandmother's careful cursive, dated the same day as the will. "Gerald and Michelle, I know you'll be disappointed in my decision, but Rebecca has earned this house through years of quiet devotion, not loud declarations. Please honor this. Don't make her fight for what I've already given her." My parents had known. For 8 years, they had known exactly what my grandmother wanted, and they buried it in an attic like a body. I called Denise immediately, reading her the will word for word over a bad cell signal in a dusty attic. "Rebecca," she said carefully, "if this is a valid, properly witnessed will, and it was never filed with probate court, that's not just a family betrayal. Depending on how your parents represented ownership on paper afterward, that could rise to fraud. I need you to photograph every page right now. Don't remove the originals, and get to my office tomorrow morning." I photographed everything with hands that wouldn't stop trembling, not from fear anymore, but from something sharper, clarity. Driving away from Cedar Hollow that evening, I passed my parents' street. I saw my father's truck in the driveway and, parked behind it, a moving truck with Jaden's furniture already being unloaded, 2 days early, like they were trying to close a wound before I could see how deep it went. I didn't stop. I drove straight to a hotel, sat on the edge of the bed, and allowed myself 30 full minutes to cry. Not for the house, but for the version of my parents I'd been grieving without knowing it. Then I wiped my face and started making calls. The closing was scheduled for Thursday at 10 a.m. On Tuesday evening, I invited my entire family to dinner at my hotel's private dining room, my parents, Jaden, and Brianna. I told them I wanted to make peace before the sale went through. I lied. I wanted the truth in front of witnesses. Denise sat at the far end of the table with a leather folder, introduced simply as a friend. Dinner was tense small talk until I set the folder in the center of the table. "I found Grandma's will," I said. "The real one, from 8 years ago." My mother's fork clattered against her plate. "Rebecca, that document it was outdated," my father stammered. "Your grandmother changed her mind later. We have a newer will." "Show it to me," I said. "Right now, show me the newer will, notarized, filed with probate." Silence stretched across the table like a held breath. "There is no newer will, is there?" I said. "There's just the one you two decided to ignore because it didn't say what you wanted it to say." Jaden finally spoke, voice cracking. "Mama, Daddy, is this true?" My mother's eyes filled with tears, but I had stopped being moved by her tears years ago, disguised as apologies. "We just wanted to help your brother. You've always landed on your feet, Rebecca. You thought stealing my inheritance was helping him?" My voice didn't rise. It went flat, cold, final. "You built his second chance on my grandmother's broken promise. That's not love. That's convenience." Brianna pushed back from the table. "I didn't know any of this," she said quietly, and for the first time, I believed one of them. My father tried one last angle, the angle that had worked on me my whole life. "Rebecca, think about the family. If you pursue this legally, it'll tear us apart. Is a house really worth losing your brother?" I looked at him for a long moment, and something inside me that had been bending for 34 years finally, quietly, stopped bending. "You didn't ask me that question when you erased my name from a dying woman's last wishes," I said. "You didn't ask me that when Brianna was filming videos in my grandmother's kitchen. You only ask me to think about the family after you've already decided I don't belong in it." My mother reached for my hand across the table. I let her take it, just for a second, then I pulled it back. "I sat with Grandma Odessa through 11 chemo appointments," I said, voice finally breaking. "I held the bucket when she got sick. I read her the Psalms when she couldn't sleep. Where were you two, Mama? Where was Jaden?" Nobody answered. Nobody could. "That house isn't just property," I continued. "It's the only place that ever told me the truth about how much I mattered. And you tried to sell it out from under me in 9 days." Denise slid the folder toward my parents. "The closing on Thursday needs to be halted immediately. This property has a competing claim tied to an unfiled will. If you proceed with the sale, you're not just breaking your daughter's heart, you're exposing yourselves to a fraud claim." My father's face went gray. My mother finally wept. Real tears, not performance. I stood up from the table. "I'm not doing this to destroy this family," I said. "I'm doing this because somebody in it finally has to tell the truth." The closing didn't happen Thursday. Denise filed an emergency claim with the probate court, presenting my grandmother's original will and the corroborating letter. The title company froze the transaction within 24 hours once fraud concerns were raised. Turns out my parents had signed an affidavit claiming no other wills existed, which is exactly the kind of thing that turns a family fight into a legal one. Jaden called me 3 days later, his voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. "I didn't know, Rebecca. I swear to God I didn't know about Grandma's will. I just wanted a fresh start, and Mama and Daddy told me it was already handled." "I believe you," I said, and I meant it. "But you also never once asked me how I'd feel. Not one phone call in 3 years." "I'm sorry," he said, and for the first time since we were kids, it didn't sound like an excuse dressed up as an apology. My parents didn't call for 2 weeks. When my mother finally did, it wasn't to apologize, it was to ask if I'd reconsider, for the family's sake. I told her I loved her, and I hung up. The probate court ultimately upheld my grandmother's original will as valid. Cedar Hollow became mine. Not through a $1.5 million purchase, but through the truth my grandmother had tried to protect for 8 years from an attic. Brianna and Jaden's engagement quietly ended 2 months later. She told a mutual friend she couldn't build a future with a family that treated inheritance like a competition. I didn't celebrate that, I just understood it. I moved into Cedar Hollow on a Sunday morning in October, the same kind of morning my grandmother used to call church weather, crisp air, gold light through the maple trees. I didn't renovate right away. I sat on the wraparound porch my first night as owner, and I swear I could still hear her voice. "This house remembers everything, baby." My relationship with my parents remains complicated. We speak, occasionally, at holidays that feel more like negotiations than gatherings. I've made peace with the fact that some people will only ever love you as much as it's convenient for them, and that peace, not bitterness, is what finally let me breathe again. Jaden and I are rebuilding, slowly, on terms that don't involve our parents deciding our worth for us. He helped me repaint the porch railings last spring. We didn't talk about the house. We didn't need to. As for me, I finally hung my design portfolio in Cedar Hollow's front hallway, the first home I ever designed as truly, legally, undeniably mine. Some nights, I still walk past my grandmother's old rocking chair in the corner of the living room, and I whisper, "Thank you," to a woman who protected me from an attic long after she was gone. I didn't get justice by yelling. I got it by refusing to disappear quietly, by trusting a document my family thought would stay buried forever. If you're watching this, and someone in your family is trying to write you out of your own story, dig deeper. The truth doesn't always shout. Sometimes it waits patiently in an attic, folded inside a manila envelope, for exactly the right person to come looking. Before you go, I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you enjoyed today's story, please like the video, subscribe for more heartwarming and unforgettable stories, and tell me what you think happened after the ending. Thanks for spending your time with me. See you soon.